If I'm being honest, I didn't even like donuts that much. Not enough, anyway, to be baking them at 3 in the morning for minimum wage. But job applications weren't exactly replying in my favor, and the ad for Red Lantern Donuts had caught my eye precisely because it looked like it had been posted in a hurry. Night baker needed immediate start, training provided, good pay, apply in person, late night hours required. The good pay part was a stretch. Still, the place was only a 20-minute walk from my apartment, and I figured it had to be easier than hauling crates in a warehouse or mopping gas station restrooms. Red Lantern was one of those old neon storefront places, the kind that looks out of place among chain coffee shops and sterile fast food counters. By day, it blended in with the row of older brick shops. But at night, that sign was a beacon. The huge red glass lantern above the window glowed as if it held an actual flame, washing the sidewalk in a warm crimson haze. The 24 hours sign below it flickered with an almost nervous rhythm. Even before I stepped inside, I caught the faint scent of sugar and fried dough, but underneath it, something else. Something metallic. I pushed open the heavy door, and a bell clanged overhead. Not the bright jingle of a modern shop bell, but the dull iron ring of something old. From behind the counter, a man in a flour-streaked apron appeared. Wiry frame, salt and pepper beard, skin that looked permanently creased from years in hot kitchens. His name badge read, "Kulkarni. You're the applicant?" he asked without a smile. I nodded, setting my backpack on the floor. Figured I'd at least try the night shift. Not much else hiring. He studied me for what felt like a full minute, then glanced toward the back kitchen. "If you're going to work here after hours, you need the rules. Health codes? Sanitation stuff." His gaze was steady, unblinking. No, not those kinds of rules. He reached beneath the counter and produced a piece of paper folded so many times it was soft at the edges. There was a faint reddish smear across the top corner jam, I told myself. But the metallic smell was back. "Read them, all of them, and don't laugh. People who laugh..." His eyes sharpened. "Don't last." I opened the paper. The title read, "Rules for Night Bakers Red Lantern Donuts." The handwriting was neat but old-fashioned, each bullet point ending in a tiny flourish. Never enter the walk-in freezer at exactly 2:34 a.m. sharp. Always offer the first glazed donut of the night to the red lantern in the back window. Place it on the plate. No substitutions. If you hear soft singing from the flower chute, cover your ears immediately and count to 20. Never under any circumstance let the dough rest beneath the red light. If a midnight customer asks for the lantern dozen, refuse politely. Do not engage further. If you find a donut you didn't make, do not touch it. Call the manager immediately. The list ended there, followed by one last sentence in smaller script. These rules are not suggestions. I looked up to find Mr. Kulkarni watching me with unsettling intensity. Are these jokes, like hazing the new guy? Before he could answer, someone emerged from the kitchen carrying a cooling rack. She was older, her hair tucked under a net, hands dusted with flour. Her name tag read, Judith. She glanced at me, then down at the paper in my hands, and her shoulders tensed. "You gave them the rules?" she asked Kulkarni in a low voice. "They'll need them." He turned to me. "And you'll follow them if you want to keep your job or yourself." Judith shot me a look that was half pity, half warning. "Don't laugh," she repeated. "We've lost a few that way." "What does that even mean?" I demanded, but neither of them answered. Kulkarni simply motioned to the swinging door leading to the back kitchen. "Your station." The kitchen was unfamiliar, not just because of the layout, but because it felt old. Not retro lunch counter older. The ovens were hulking iron beasts, their doors etched with faint markings that might have been decorative swirls, or something more deliberate. The single long prep table had grooves worn into its surface from decades of knife cuts and heavy trays. On the wall above the fryers hung the red lantern. It was smaller than the one outside, made of weathered brass and thick, wavy glass. Inside, a flame-like glow flickered constantly, though no visible cord or fuel source fed it. "That's where you'll leave the first donut every night," Judith said, nodding toward the lantern. "The plate's under it." I glanced at the plate plane, white ceramic. It was perfectly clean. "Okay, so is that like an offering? For luck?" Judith didn't answer. She just went back to glazing a tray of crullers, the metallic smell fading in and out with the steam. The rest of my first shift passed in a blur of flour, sugar, and heat. Kulkarni disappeared into the office for long stretches, leaving me alone with the ovens and my thoughts. The only sounds were the clink of utensils, the faint hum of the fryer, and once the distant rattle of what I assumed was a delivery truck. But twice that night, I thought I heard something else. The first time, as I was pouring flour into the mixing bowl, a faint hum echoed down from the metal chute overhead, like someone singing to themselves far up on the rooftop. The tune slippery, just out of rhythm. I froze, remembering the rule. "Cover your ears." My hands shot up, pressing hard as I mentally counted to 20. The singing rose in pitch for a heartbeat before fading. When I lowered my hands, the kitchen was silent again. The second time, around 3:15, I noticed a donut sitting alone on the corner of my prep table. I hadn't made it. It wasn't one of ours. The glaze was a deep, unnatural crimson I'd never seen before, and as I stared at it, tiny bubbles seemed to form and pop on the surface. I was reaching toward it, a curiosity overriding caution, when Judith's voice snapped like a whip from behind me. "Don't touch it!" I jerked my hand back. She was pale, her eyes fixed on the thing like it might leap off the table. "Well, I'll take care of it," she said quickly, sliding it onto a baking tray using a spatula. She glanced toward the office door before disappearing into the walk-in freezer. I noticed the clock on the wall, 2:35 a.m. When she returned, her face was set in a grim mask. "If you see one of those again," she said quietly, "call the manager. Don't move it yourself. And don't eat anything you didn't make." "Was that one of the rules?" I asked. She didn't answer. And that's when I realized the printed list wasn't complete. By 5 a.m., my body felt coated in sugar and sweat. Kulkarni emerged from his office in time to help fill the display case for the morning crowd. He glanced at me with something like approval. "You made it through your first night. Most don't." "Because of the rules?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He smiled without humor. "Because they think the rules are a game." I thought about the singing in the chute, the strange red-glazed donut, Judith vanishing into the freezer. No, there was nothing playful about this place. Before I left, I passed the red lantern again. The white plate was empty now. I didn't remember anyone removing the donut. The sun was coming up as I walked home, but the afterimage of that crimson lantern burned in my sight like I'd been staring into a real flame. I told myself tomorrow would just be more donuts, more flour, more heat, but deep down I knew better. The rules were real, and something in that kitchen was hungry. I thought the second shift would be easier. I figured nerves would settle, and I'd get into some kind of groove, mixing batter, glazing rings, dodging Judith's stern glances. I was wrong. By midnight, the kitchen felt twice as big and 10 times as silent. The gleam of the ovens, black iron, etched with old symbols, seemed to pulse with heat like a steady heartbeat deep in the floor. Every time I checked the wall clock, the red lantern above the window flickered a little brighter. The rules echoed in my mind like an old song stuck in the background. Never enter the freezer at 2:34. Offer the first donut to the lantern. Cover your ears if the chute sings. Never rest dough beneath the red light. I did everything right, or tried to. Still, the sense of being watched was stronger than before. Judith was out front prepping all the fancy display stuff for morning rush, leaving me truly alone in the back kitchen. Mr. Kulkarni hadn't shown up tonight. His office door stayed firmly shut, a thin crack of red light spilling beneath. Midnight came and went. Around 12:45, I dumped the flour for the next batch. The mound shifted unexpectedly, spilling out in odd clumps. Before I could reach for the water, a low hum drifted from the chute overhead. Just the faintest, wavering note, like distant lullaby singing. My pulse jumped. "Cover your ears, count to 20. I dropped the measuring cup and pressed my palms hard against both sides of my head, squeezing so tight my jaw ached. I counted. 1, 2, 3. By 12, the humming grew louder. Not music, but a strange shimmer, like dozens of voices harmonizing on a note that was slightly off, almost sickly sweet. 19, 20. I dropped my hands, blinking in the fluorescent glare. The sound had stopped, but my heart was racing, and the kitchen felt colder. I checked the dough workspace, hands trembling. The flour had settled, and for a brief, impossible moment, I saw letters outlined in the powder. Not Latin, not any alphabet I'd seen. A swirl of curves and dots that, when I blinked, blurred and scattered. I braced myself against the steel counter and stared at the red lantern in the window. Its flame pulsed gently, casting circular shadows on the wall that seemed to move. I set out the first glazed donut on the plate, not daring to skip any steps. Minutes later, I moved the dough trays near the oven, careful to avoid the reach of the red light glowing overhead. But as I rolled out the rings, something flickered past the furthest oven, a blurry shadow, like a person, tall and gaunt, standing just out of sight. I froze. "Judith?" I called. My voice was thin, swallowed by the room. No answer, only the soft tap-tap-tap from the cold tile behind me. I forced myself to focus. I spun dough and lined up rounds for frying. But every couple of minutes I glimpsed movement in the corner, flashes of black and red. The wall clock ticked slow. My eyes darted to the walk-in freezer, steel door slick with condensation. The temperature in the kitchen plummeted unexpectedly. Not the brisk chill of freezer air, the kind that burns your nose, but something else, older. I shivered, eyes watering. That same metallic tang lingered heavy near my station, sharper than before. I stepped gingerly toward the pantry door to grab extra yeast, but when I pulled it open, a rush of air, cold and dry, hit me in the face. Inside, the shelves looked wrong, too deep, too shadowy, like the back wall had receded by 10 feet. Pallets stacked high, stretched into darkness. At the very end, a pale shape hunched over a bin. My breath caught. I took a step forward, nearly tripping over my apron cord. The shape straightened. It was just a flour sack, toppled and split at one edge. But for a split second, I thought I saw fingers, thin, white, doughy, curling in the spill. I backed away. The pantry light flickered, guttered, then steadied. I locked the door, hands shaking as I returned. Goosebumps ran down my arms. This wasn't just nerves and bad sleep. Something was wrong here. The ovens whirred audibly. Steam rose from the fryers as I dunked a fresh batch. The dough rings hissed and swelled, turning golden. But as I pulled them out, one was jet black, hard as a stone, cold to the touch, with deep red cracks running through the glaze. "If you find a donut you didn't make, don't touch it. Call the manager immediately." Kulkarni's office was silent. I glanced nervously at the freezer. Judith was still nowhere to be found. I left the blackened donut where it sat, right in the tray, and tried to focus on finishing the batch. The air grew heavier. The red lantern's glow stretched farther across the counters, throwing long shadows that curled around my feet like smoke. Suddenly, a faint clicking sound came from behind the ovens, the space where the metal backs pressed against the wall. It was rhythmic, too precise to be random. I leaned in, peering past racks and old baking trays. For an instant, looking down, I saw two shadows, one mine, the other not, standing side by side. I spun around, heart bouncing off my ribs. No one was there. I took refuge by the sink, washing hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The water ran hot at first, then icy cold. My reflection in the window was blurred and distorted, twisted out of shape by the red glow behind me. A sudden clatter snapped me out of my daze. A tray of donuts slid off the counter on its own, landing with a heavy thud on the tile. None of the rounds rolled. Instead, they lay in a perfect ring, circling the black donut. I grabbed the kitchen phone, dialing the manager's line. It just rang. No voicemail, no answer. I thought about ignoring it, just dumping the entire tray in the trash, but the memory of Judith's warning held me. I remembered the rule. Don't touch it. Call the manager. Instead, I backed up and started to clean around the edges, eyes darting to the clock. 2:34 a.m. At that exact moment, the freezer's compressor hummed to life. A low, grinding, guttural sound. The wall lamps flickered, and the red lantern in the window blazed brighter, flooding the kitchen in crimson. The black donut in the center cracked, sending a plume of frigid air upward. The ring of rounds trembled, a low vibration pulsing through the steel table as the shadow on the wall lengthened, stretching up, splitting into a dozen branching limbs. I ran to the prep table, pulling my hands tight against my ears, bracing for the terrible singing, but none came. Just the click, click, click of unseen footsteps, slow as a metronome. All at once, the red light faded, waned as quickly as it had surged. The black donut stopped steaming. The ring of rounds collapsed, rolling haphazardly around the tray. The temperature returned to normal, and the lantern dimmed. The kitchen was still again. I sat on the edge of the sink, heart pounding, chest tight, sweat running down my face despite the chill. Dawn was only half an hour away. The world outside was pale and quiet, but the sense of something watching, waiting, clung to me thicker than the scent of sugar in my hair. Judith found me just before morning. She looked me over, eyes grim. "Did you break any rules?" I shook my head. "One tried to break itself." She nodded, a flicker of relief glancing off her face. "Good. That's when it gets dangerous." She gestured to the black donut still lying at the center of the prep table. "We'll deal with it together. For now, get some air. Let the sunrise clear it." Her words didn't help. As I walked out the door, the first light of morning pierced the bakery's red haze and for a moment cast perfect shadows behind me. Mine and another, indistinguishable but there. I told myself tomorrow I'd be stronger, that the rules were enough. But the memory of that blackened donut and the whispering shadows promised otherwise. Red lantern donuts had secrets, and tonight they almost claimed me. I didn't sleep the morning after my second shift. I lay in bed, staring at patterns on the ceiling, as if some hidden message might stitch itself out of the cracks and fading paint. All I could think about was the humming in the chute, those impossible shadows skating behind the ovens, and Judith's terrified precision, how she moved like someone working inside a lion's cage. A red glow still burned at the back of my vision from the lantern. I kept replaying every rule Kulkarni had handed me, wondering which had saved me and which I might break next, by accident or design. Judith found me at the start of the shift, before I even made it onto the floor. "You read them all?" she murmured, her eyes tracing the crumpled paper in my fist. "I did," I said quietly. "Mostly, I think." There was a queasy honesty in my voice, the kind that comes when you realize you're not just afraid of another person, but of the place itself. She nodded. "Read them out loud. Here, while there's still people around." I unfolded the rules, feeling the weight of habit and ritual, and cleared my throat. Never enter the walk-in freezer at exactly 2:34 a.m. sharp. Judith's jaw tightened, her knuckles pale against her apron. We lost Greg to that one. Swore he heard scratching inside. Opened the door at the wrong time. He never came out. Always offer the first glazed donut of the night to the red lantern in the back window. Place it on the plate. No substitutions. I remembered the first night, the way no one ever removed the offering, yet the plate was empty by dawn. Judith whispered, "We left the first one unglazed once. Spent the rest of that week trying to fix ovens that kept charring every batch. The lantern didn't like it. If you hear soft singing from the flower chute, Cover your ears immediately and count to 20. The chill returned as I remembered the haunting lullaby, the urge to listen, to let it in. One guy listened once, Judith said. He started humming to himself at work, then went quiet. His house was filled with flour, ceiling, windows, everything, when they finally checked on him. Never under any circumstance let the dough rest beneath the red light. I paused, picturing how the dough swelled and grayed that time I nearly left it there carelessly. If it rests beneath the red light, she said, it won't bake right. Sometimes it doesn't bake at all. Sometimes it moves. If a midnight customer asks for the lantern dozen, refuse politely. Do not engage further. Do people really ask for that? I wondered. Twice since I've worked here, Judith said. Once they screeched when we refused. Once they just smiled and left. But the cash drawer froze shut for 3 days. If you find a donut you didn't make, do not touch it. Call the manager immediately. I nodded, remembering the crimson bubbling donut and Judith's urgency. Never ever eat a donut you didn't fry yourself. I looked at the bottom of the page, that final tiny flourish. These rules are not suggestions. Judith let out a shuddering breath. People think this is all theater, so when something goes wrong, they joke or quit, or try to fix it. Her eyes went distant, heavy with memories. Danny laughed about the rules. I think he lasted 4 shifts. The rest of the crew trickled in, just a half-dozen night bakers. I noticed they all kept their name badges tucked under their aprons, like badges would only invite bad luck. We set up, but the bakery was quieter than usual. Everyone kept glancing at the lantern. I tried, for a moment, to ask about the past, about whether anyone had ever tried breaking all the rules at once. A baker named Reese only shook his head, flour dusting his beard. The rules get added every time they fail to work. That's why the list keeps growing. I remember when there were only 3. I was suddenly aware of how old everything felt. From the iron ovens, to the knife-scarred prep tables, to the lantern's undying flame. The night dragged by in molasses until, just past 2, I heard the faintest humming. This time from the pantry and the chute. Goosebumps pricked my arms as I pressed both hands to my ears, counting with frantic speed. The lights dimmed. The kitchen seemed to pulse with breath. When the hum died, I unclenched my hands, but the strange feeling didn't lift. A single donut, perfectly formed but eerily cold, had appeared on a rack to my left. Not mine. No one claimed it. I did as the rules said. Called Kulkarni, voice shaky, refusing to touch it. He came from the office, his face ashen. He used 2 spatulas and a box to lift the donut. As he carried it out, the lantern in the window flared so bright we all squinted. Kulkarni muttered something in a language I didn't recognize before tossing the donut into the alley's dumpster. Ignore any singing tonight, he warned us, and clean the counters twice. Only twice, never 3. I didn't want to think about what happened if we cleaned them 3 times. The rest of the shift, every donut I made felt heavier, as if the dough was resisting my hands, aware of its fate. In the silence, I felt ancient eyes on my back, the bakery's history reaching out with invisible fingers. Near dawn, Judith cornered me by the lockers. You're doing well, but don't be brave, she whispered. If you survive the week, don't come back. And when you leave, don't look at the lantern. Not at night. That warning, more than anything, made my skin crawl. I glanced at the red lantern's glow, too bright, almost greedy, then turned away. As I exited into the gray-tinted morning, I heard, for the briefest moment, soft humming winding through the street like a siren. Red Lantern Doughnuts was awake, and somewhere inside, the rules waited for someone new to break them. If I thought the second night was strange, the third pushed me into a world I wasn't prepared for. Something about Red Lantern Doughnuts wasn't just old and quirky, it was alive. And whatever fed on that old kitchen wanted more than sugar and flour. The night began like the ones before. I arrived early, the bakery glowing with its infamous red light that spilled warmth and shadow across the empty street. I hung my bag, rubbed my hands together to chase off the chill, and pulled out the folded rules sheet once more. By now, the weight of those words felt like armor. Never enter the walk-in freezer at exactly 2:34 a.m. Always offer the first glazed donut to the red lantern. I made my rounds, checking trays, mixing batter, watching the ovens breathe heat and hiss steam. Judith had shown up late. Something about a family emergency she couldn't ignore. That left me alone in the heart of the bakery, with just the hum of machines and the eerie flicker of the lantern. I'd barely settled into my rhythm when I spilled a small scoop of dough onto the counter. With a sigh, I brushed it toward the floor, but needles of unease prickled my skin. The dough twitched, just the slightest impossible movement. I blinked, and it lay still again. I shook it off and went about my work, but a nagging urge to avoid letting any dough rest under the red light made me extra cautious. A few hours later, just past midnight, I placed a tray of freshly rolled dough rings next to the oven, careful to ensure the red glow didn't touch them. My eyes flicked over the racks and racks of doughnuts in various states of baking, all ready to transform into the golden, sugary treats people loved. But then I noticed something. One tray beneath the red light wasn't how I'd left it. The dough there was swelling at an unnatural rate, puffing up far beyond normal expectations. It was changing color, gray, mottled with streaks that looked like veins pulsing beneath the surface. A faint vapor seeped from between the dough rings, curling upward like smoke. I froze. A soft sound reached my ears, a low murmur running just beneath the bakery's machines. A chorus of whispers threading through the chilled air. Countless voices, each a breath, a secret, a warning. I stepped closer, hand trembling. A shadow flickered at the corner of my eye, dark and twisting like smoke. The long iron ovens creaked with a sound like bones under strain. I blinked, but there was nothing there. I glanced back at the dough. It squirmed. The gray mass oozed ever so slowly, pushing against its tray like it longed to escape. My heart pounded as the whispers grew louder. They spun around me, overlapping syllables I could almost understand. Faint words begging, cursing. "Don't touch it," a voice hissed, breath cold and urgent. I pulled my hands back just as the doughing began to pulse in time with my racing heart. The vapors thickened, curling cold around my wrists and crawling up my arms. I dropped the tray with a clatter. The swelled dough lay twisted now, as if warped by something alive beneath the surface, small indentations appearing where no fingers had pressed. Suddenly, a cold grip seized my wrist. I yelped, wrenching my arm free, but the chill lingered, crawling beneath my skin like ice water. My breath came fast and shallow. I gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. The bakery was silent except for the hum of the fryer and the faintest eerie tapping from the floor behind me. Click-clack, like footsteps just out of sight. I spun around. Nothing but shadows. Panicked, I reached for the phone to call Kulkarni, heart hammering as a new fear settled in my belly. What would happen if I'd broken yet another rule? I dialed, and the line stayed dead. Judith wouldn't answer either. The bakery was mine alone with the shadows. I glanced back at the blackened dough on the floor. The whispers grew to a chorus, 1,000 voices layered like a song of warning and sorrow. As vapors wreathed the counters and the red lantern's glow deepened to a hungry red. My legs gave way and I sank to the floor, eyes wild. In the kitchen, "The night grows hungry," I whispered, voice shaking. Terrified, I crawled to the door, desperate for daylight, for escape. The oven door creaked open abruptly, the heat blasting out like a breath of fire. I scrambled away as a fresh wave of cold flesh brushed over my skin. A touch not human, not warm. I staggered into the dawn light outside, heart pounding, cheeks wet with sweat or tears, not sure which. Even the sun felt weak against the darkness clinging to me. Later, Kulkarni found me sitting on the sidewalk, staring at my shaking hands. He didn't scold. He only said quietly, One breach is forgivable, two isn't. Judith appeared beside him, her face grim but steady. "No one wants to lose you," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the weight of too many nights like this. I nodded, clutching the rules sheet until the paper creased beneath my fingers. Somewhere behind me, the red lantern's light glimmered in the early morning haze, and I knew the kitchen wasn't done with me yet. There are nights at Red Lantern where the rules feel like a chain around your neck. Then there are nights where you realize that chain is the only thing keeping your head attached. After the dough incident, I moved through my shifts in a constant state of hyper-awareness. Every placement of every tray was double-checked against the reach of the red light. Every batch was accounted for by my own hands. But even obsession can't anticipate everything. It happened at 3:03 a.m. exactly. Quiet night. The air thick with the combined heat of the ovens and the fryer's oily perfume. Judith was in the storeroom doing inventory. Kulkarni had disappeared into his office and locked the door from the inside. I was alone at the counter, glazing a new batch, when the front doorbell rang. It wasn't the usual jingle of daytime customers, loud, eager, but a slow, deliberate chime, like someone opening the door with reverence. Cold air swept in, cutting through the kitchen's warmth. A man stepped inside, tall, thin, dressed in a gray three-piece suit that looked older than my grandparents'. His skin was the color of powdered sugar, too pale under the bakery's red wash, and his eyes, gray-blue, like cloudy ice, never blinked once as they fixed on me. He stepped up to the counter without looking at the menu boards. His voice was low, smooth, but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the machines. "I'll have the lantern dozen," he said. My skin went cold. My hand froze inches over a cooling rack. Rule 5. If a midnight customer asks for the lantern dozen, refuse politely. Do not engage further. Polite. Don't engage. "I'm sorry, sir," I managed, forcing my voice steady. "That item isn't available." He tilted his head slightly, like I'd just insulted him. "Isn't available?" The words were drawn out, quiet enough that I almost had to lean in to hear them. I took a step back instead. "No, sir. We don't make those here." The smile that spread across his face didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, but you do. I can smell them. Fresh." His nostrils flared slightly, and I swear the lights above us dimmed. I didn't answer. Didn't ask what he meant. The rule was clear. "Perhaps you're new," he continued, still smiling. "Perhaps you don't understand. The lantern dozen is mine. It's owed." I kept my expression neutral, like I'd been taught for dealing with belligerent customers in old retail jobs. "I'll be happy to help you choose something else." For a moment, the bakery held its breath. The red lantern above the window flickered once, twice. Then his smile vanished, and his voice dropped, not in volume but weight, each word landing like a stone. "Remember this, little baker. You can only refuse for so long." He placed something on the counter. My stomach turned. It was a donut. Not any donut I'd made. Not anything from our racks. The glaze was a deep, glistening red. Not the color of cherry or strawberry, but something darker. It pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat under glass. I forced myself not to touch it. Rule 6. If you find a donut you didn't make, do not touch it. Call the manager immediately. My hand crept toward the kitchen phone under the counter, but before I could dial, the front door chimed again. Blink. He was gone. No footsteps. No fading sound of the door swinging shut. Just empty air where he'd stood. The donut remained. Judith came in seconds later, saw the counter, and her face went white. "Back room, now," she hissed. We retreated to the pantry, and I could hear her locking the door behind us. "He came for it, didn't he?" I nodded. My mouth was dry. "Who is he?" "That's not a who," she said. "That's the collector. He used to come once a decade. Started coming more often these past few years. Always asks for the lantern dozen. If anyone ever says yes," she trailed off, but her meaning was clear. "Has anyone ever said yes?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the corner, jaw tight. "Not twice." Through the thin wall, I thought I heard the faintest sound, a tapping, like fingernails on glass. In the next heartbeat, it stopped. Kulkarni arrived, his face drawn, lips tight. Without speaking, he slid heavy rubber gloves onto his hands, picked up the red glazed donut with a pair of metal tongs, and dropped it into a small steel box I'd never seen before. He locked the box with a key from around his neck. "You did well," he said at last. "The rules save you if you let them. But once he asks, he always comes back." Judith's voice was barely audible. "The next time might not be a polite visit." Kulkarni looked at me like a man about to tell the price of my own funeral. "When he returns, and he will, you must refuse again and again. Do not let him make you speak beyond that. If you call the dozen by name, you've already given it to him." I nodded shakily. We finished the shift in silence. Near dawn, while cleaning up, I caught myself glancing at the window every few minutes, half expecting those pale eyes to be watching from the street. They weren't. Instead, as I flipped the open sign to closed for morning prep, I noticed something taped to the outside door. A single sheet of paper. Across it, in perfect cursive, were 3 words: "You owe me." After the night of the lantern dozen, I couldn't look at the bakery's ovens the same way. They'd always been unnerving black cast iron, too large for a shop our size. Their doors etched with curling designs, but now they felt alive, watching, listening. Even during prep, there was a weight to them, like old monuments in a graveyard. They didn't groan and hum like normal machines. Their noises had cadence like breathing. Kulkarni noticed me lingering one shift and said without looking up from his clipboard, "Don't stare into them too long. They stare back." I half laughed before seeing his eyes. He wasn't joking. That night, he told Judith to stay up front with the counter locked, leaving me alone in the kitchen. "You'll do the offering," he said simply. That was all he called it, the offering. No instructions, no explanation beyond the rules I already knew. The first glazed donut to the red lantern every night, but there was something in his tone that made it clear this was different. The bakery felt heavier with them gone. It started with the clicks. When the ovens are hot, they sometimes make a ticking sound as the metal shifts. This was different. It was deliberate, a sequence, like fingers tapping out some old language on the inside walls. Tap, 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 tap. I slid the first glazed donut onto the plate beneath the smaller red lantern, just like always. The metal around me seemed to warm, not the normal sugar and yeast heat, but a dry, searing pressure that made the air feel thin. Kulkarni's voice echoed through my memory. "Don't let the dough rest beneath the red light." My gaze flicked up. The big oven's central door was glowing faintly. That had never happened before. I mussed with the trays just to keep my hands busy, but something changed in the sound of the ovens. The hiss of the burners became a low, steady sigh. For a moment, I thought the glass in the little viewing windows was clouding over with steam, but it wasn't steam. It was shapes, shadows, moving just behind the glass, as though a light flickered deep inside. I caught glimpses of hands dusted in flour, not mine, reaching, shaping, folding dough that wasn't on any of my trays. I felt rooted to the spot, watching these phantom bakers labor in absolute silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the oven, a voice, faint but distinct, whispered my name. The rational part of my brain screamed, "Close the shutter, walk away." But the pull was magnetic. I stepped closer, the heat prickling my skin without burning. The figures inside worked faster now, their movements frantic. One lifted its head and looked straight at me. I stumbled back hard enough to rattle a tray off the counter. It wasn't a face. Not exactly. More like someone's features remembered, wrong eyes too wide and bright. Mouth just slightly misplaced in the pale dough-like skin. The tap, tap, tap came again, right against the glass, and I knew it was beckoning. I remembered the rules, the ones that weren't written down but were implied in the others. Do not engage, do not answer. I turned away, forced myself to focus on frying the next batch, but the room wouldn't let go. The reflections in every metal surface, the sinks, the dough hook. Even the fryer oil caught red flickers that weren't from the lantern. Flickers in time with the oven door glow. And woven through the clang of utensils was something else. A faint, steady hum. Not the chute's lullaby, this was lower, older. A sound that reminded me of someone exhaling through a long, hollow pipe. It filled my ears so completely that I almost missed the shape on the counter. A doughnut, not one of mine, sitting there steaming faintly, with a red sugar glaze glistening more wet than shiny. The air around it felt thinner. I didn't need the rules to tell me not to touch it. I backed away, heart thudding as I grabbed the phone to call Kulkarni. It rang 3 times before I heard the outer door to the kitchen open. He came in fast, face drawn tight. "You didn't touch it?" "No." His relief was visible but short-lived. "Good. That batch isn't for us." I wanted to ask who it was for, but Judith suddenly appeared in the doorway, pale. "It's here." Kulkarni nodded like they'd been expecting this. He took the doughnut, using heavy tongs, and placed it on the plate beneath the lantern. "Back," he ordered us. We stepped away. The lantern's glow intensified, flooding the countertop in almost liquid-looking red light. I could swear the doughnut sank into the plate slowly, like it was melting into it. The smell was strange, burnt sugar, cinnamon, and something faintly metallic. When the last wisp of steam curled upward, the light dimmed, and outside, somewhere far down the empty street, I heard the echo of the same tapping I'd heard from the oven glass. Later, Kulkarni explained if you can call his kind of half-truth an explanation. "The ovens," he said, "aren't just ovens, they connect us to before." "Before what?" I asked. Judith shot him a glance, and he only said, "Before the lantern. Before the red lantern was here." He told me the offerings didn't just keep something sated, they kept it on its side. Whatever existed in the ovens and shadows could push through under the right conditions. And the red lantern, the rules, the midnight rituals, all of it were the locks. Break a lock, the door starts to open. And from what I'd seen tonight, something in those ovens was already leaning on the door. I left that morning with a sour taste in my mouth, and the phantom warmth of the ovens still on my skin. As I turned the corner, I glanced back just once. The lantern's crimson glow spilled out onto the street like a living thing, and in the reflection of the front glass, behind where I'd just been standing, a long pale hand rested on the inside of the oven door. I came in that night feeling different. Not calmer, not braver, just heavier, like I'd seen the locks holding something back, and knew in my gut they weren't going to hold forever. Even in daylight, the smell of scorched sugar seemed to cling to my clothes, a ghost of the ovens that no detergent could strip away. My dreams were laced with tapping fingers and pale hands reaching out from rippling red light. I wasn't sure where the nightmares stopped and my memories began. Kulkarni was waiting for me when I came through the door, not behind the counter, not in his office, right there in the middle of the shop, leaning on the old pastry case like he'd been waiting for hours. "Close up," he said. "We need to talk before the ovens wake." That was the first time I'd heard him speak of the ovens like living things, and after the last couple of nights I didn't question it. Judith slipped in from the back, eyes darting toward the lantern in the window. "You're telling them now?" she asked quietly. Kulkarni didn't answer her. His eyes stayed on me. "You've made it farther than most," he said. 3 nights is easy. 4, if you keep your head down. But by night 6, one of 2 things happens. You stop coming in, or the place takes notice. "I think the place already noticed me," I said, forcing a weak laugh. He didn't return it. "Exactly. Which means it's time for you to hear the last rule." I pulled the now creased sheet of rules for night bakers from my apron pocket. "Last one? I thought I already had them all." "That's the thing about rules here," Judith said. "They don't all come printed." Kulkarni stepped closer, his face grim. "The exit rule. It's simple, but it's the only one that matters if you value walking away." He took the paper and, with the stub of a pencil from his chest pocket, wrote one more line at the very bottom. Rule 7. If you survive 7 consecutive night shifts, never return after the 7th morning. I frowned. That's it? Just quit? Not quit, he said. Stay gone. Do not so much as walk past the shop when the lantern is lit. Don't glance in. Don't even think about stepping through the door. If you do, he trailed off. Judith finished for him. It will know you were foolish enough to come back. The ovens? I asked. More than the ovens, Kulkarni said. What's behind them? Pieces slid together in my mind. The phantom bakers I'd seen, the tapping in the glass, the voices whispering from steam and shadow. You mean the thing you've been feeding? With the offerings? He didn't deny it. You call them offerings. I call them locks on a door. Whatever that thing is, it understands the people who work here. And if you keep showing up after your time's done, it stops seeing you as part of the lock. I felt my skin crawl. It sees me as food. Kulkarni's silence was answer enough. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. So what happens if someone doesn't leave when their 7 nights are up? Judith looked away. Sometimes they stop showing up in daylight. Sometimes parts of them do. The room seemed to grow smaller. I'd survived this long without touching the wrong doughnuts, without letting the dough rest under the red light, without opening the freezer at the wrong second. And now they were telling me there was an expiration date stamped on my survival. How many nights am I at now? I asked, though I already knew. 6, Kulkarni said, which means tomorrow morning's your last. Then what's tonight? His answer was almost a whisper. The test. The shift began like any other, but the air in the kitchen tasted charged, metallic. Even the lantern's glow was clearer, burning more steadily, as if it knew the stakes. The ovens were already warm when I came in. That was unusual. Judith stayed up front, pretending to wipe down the counter, but I could see her hands shaking. Midway through the shift, I caught the first whiff of that burnt sugar and metal scent coming from the central oven. A faint tapping began inside the glass. Patient and regular tap. Tap, tap, tap. I kept my eyes on the dough I was cutting, but the reflection in the shiny metal trays betrayed movement. Hands pressed against the inside of the oven, sliding along the glass like they were mapping the way out. From the corner of my eye, I saw shapes forming inside bakers without faces, bending and twisting dough into knots and spirals. The movements grew frantic, faster and sharper. The tapping stopped. Then something tapped behind me. I turned against my better judgment. On the counter lay a single red-glazed doughnut, fresh steam curling off it. It pulsed, slowly, like something inside was breathing. My instincts screamed to grab the phone. But when I looked for it, the cord hung loose and dead, swinging gently, as if it had just been pulled from the wall. I backed away from the counter toward the door to the front of the shop, but the crimson light from the lantern seemed to follow me, stretching shadows across the flour-dusted floor. The doughnut sat perfectly still on its plate, waiting. That was when I heard the voice. Not Kulkarni's, not Judith's, not human. Low, curling around the edges of my mind like smoke seeping under a door. One more night, Baker. One more and you won't have to leave. Ever. My breath caught. My skin prickled cold. The rules surged in my mind. Never engage, never accept. Stay gone after 7. Tonight was 6. If I answered, if I so much as acknowledged the thing's offer, I knew I'd never walk out on morning 7. My hands were trembling so hard, I could barely grab the first finished batch from the fryer. I placed a single glazed doughnut beneath the smaller lantern in the kitchen, forcing my eyes to the floor. The ovens hissed like steam escaping from a long-sealed crypt. The red-glazed thing on the counter whispered once more, a sound like a sigh, and a hiss merged, and then it was gone. Just gone. By the time Kulkarni came back and flipped the lock on his office door, the kitchen was silent again. "You kept your eyes down?" he asked. I nodded. "You didn't answer it?" I shook my head, throat dry. He exhaled a long, quiet breath. Good, because if you had, tomorrow morning wouldn't be your exit. It was almost dawn when I left, the cold gray light bleeding into the shop from the street. I glanced once at the red lantern and saw my own reflection in the glass. For just a half second, there was something standing behind me in that reflection. It wore my apron, but it wasn't me. I didn't look again. Tomorrow morning, it would be over. One more shift, one more offering, one more night of ovens and echoes. If I was lucky, I'd never see the red lantern lit again. I told myself morning 7 was the end. I told myself that when I walked out of Red Lantern Doughnuts just after sunrise, apron folded under my arm and the smell of burnt sugar still clinging to my hair, that would be it. The rules said never return after the 7th morning. Fine by me. I didn't need convincing. The streets were damp with last night's rain, pale light seeping between brick buildings. The red lantern glimmered faintly in the front window, different under daylight dimmer, no longer burning like an ember about to split open. But I never met its gaze. I walked straight past, eyes fixed on the sidewalk, telling myself that when I turned the corner, I'd never see it again. Kulkarni didn't say goodbye. Judith gave me a silent nod, her lips pressed in something like relief, but also pity. They knew what leaving really meant. The first 2 days were quiet. I slept in long, heavy stretches, waking only to eat or drink, catching up on a week's worth of missed hours. My phone didn't buzz, no strange calls, no dead air on the line. I almost believed the exit rule had pulled me clean. Then on the 3rd morning, I woke to find something on my kitchen counter. A donut. Plain sugar glaze, still faintly warm, sitting on a white plate I didn't own. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe too close to it. I took a towel, wrapped it without looking, carried it outside to throw in the dumpster. When I stepped back into my apartment, the air tasted faintly of cinnamon and hot metal. I started noticing little changes after that. The hum of my refrigerator had a rhythm to it, one I recognized from the oven's tapping language. At night, my bedroom walls pulsed faintly with light, not white or yellow, but a deep, suffused red, gone the instant I turned on the lamp. Sometimes walking home after errands, I'd catch a sweet, heavy scent hanging in the air fryer oil and sugar, only to realize there were no bakeries on that street. And sometimes, in a shop window or a bus door, I'd catch my reflection, except it wasn't moving exactly when I moved. It lagged, just for half a heartbeat, just long enough to tell me it was waiting. The first real scare came one night when I was brushing my teeth. Through the mirror's fog, I saw the outline of my kitchen behind me, the counter, the fridge, the chair I always left tucked in, and, for a moment, the faint glow of a red lantern swinging slowly in the dark. When I turned around, there was nothing. I called Judith the next day. No answer. I walked by Red Lantern on the far side of the street, like skirting a venomous snake. The sign was lit. The lantern was burning like I'd never left. And in the front window, at the counter, was someone in my apron. I froze, breath locking in my chest. It wasn't me, not exactly. The posture was wrong. The way the head tilted was too sharp, and when it looked up, the eyes in my face were a shade too pale. It smiled at me. My legs moved before my brain caught up, and I ran until the warm glow of that lantern was swallowed by gray streets. The exit rule had given me my freedom, but it had also marked me. I think now that's what Kulkarni meant when he said, "If you survive, stay gone." It wasn't just a warning to avoid the lantern, it was a warning that the lantern wouldn't avoid me. The knocks started the week after. 3, every time. Slow, deliberate. Always at night. Sometimes at the door, sometimes at the window. Once impossibly from inside the wall behind my headboard. I never answered. But in the silence after each knock, I'd hear it. Faint hissing. The sigh of the ovens heating up. Just like at the start of a shift. I kept thinking about the 7th night, about the voice whispering, "You won't have to leave. Ever." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And promises like that don't vanish. They wait. This morning, as I write this, there's a box outside my apartment door. No address label, no tape. I haven't opened it. I don't think I need to. Through the thin cardboard, I can smell it glaze and cinnamon, and something darker beneath, sharp and metallic. I think if I open it, it'll be warm inside. Warm in a way I'll recognize too well. If you ever see the help wanted sign for Red Lantern Doughnuts night shift, keep walking. Doesn't matter how desperate you are, or how much you like the smell of fresh glaze, or how harmless the little red glow in the window looks at 3 in the morning. No paycheck is worth learning those rules, because the rules will keep you alive in there, but they won't let you go completely. And when the lantern lights up for you again, you'll know what it's really been baking all along. You.